Welcome everybody to MLL Roundtable on a snowy and somewhat cold and odd-weathered Tuesday night here for InLacrosseWeTrust.com on the Lacrosse Radio Network on Live 365. I am your host, Andrew Goldberg, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Brendan Stout. You can tweet at us at MLL Roundtable, at Goldieberg, and at BStout631. A lot of exciting lacrosse news over last week. For anyone who followed Major League Lacrosse and their Twitter handle, they said they were, gonna announce some very exciting things, and it really got some lacrosse fans on edge as to what could possibly be coming. And the news was big, really big, in fact, as they brought in STX as their official sponsor. They signed a partnership with the LXM Pro Tour. They also announced more games on the CBS Sports Network, and they even have their own stringing company. But before we get to all that, Brendan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. I'm tired of the snow. Phil the Groundhog's got some questions to answer. Telling me that there's 6 more weeks of winter. I'm done.
I don't know about you, but up by me, I got another 2 to 3 inches of snow. It snowed like 3 or 4 days ago, and before that it snowed, and before that, I got snow piles like, it's dangerous to drive to look around the corner because you don't know what's coming because the snow piles are so high. And then there's still patches on the roads that, it's like fine, and then there's snow on the ground, and then there's and then it's fine, and then like outside of the main highways, it's like around the local stuff, it's like kind of treacherous. Is that the same by you?
Yeah, man. These mounds of snow are taller than me, and I'm 6'3". Like, this ain't right. Mother Nature is just screwing with us now, man.
Yeah, I don't know what her deal is. I don't know if she got dumped before, Valentine's Day, or if it's that time of the month for her, or, what's really going on here. But global warming, what? I don't think global warming is is like a myth or anything.
No, I think Al Gore's gonna have to retract his statement on that one.
Yeah, unless global warming all of a sudden made everything, huge weather swings in terms of when it's cold, it's going to be really cold and really crappy, and when it's warm, it's going to be really hot and really crappy as well. I don't really know what's going on there.
Yeah, I was watching The Day After Tomorrow last night, and I was just like, this would be interesting if it happened, but it'd be interesting. Kind of is, though.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if another day after tomorrow happens where the whole world's going crazy. Yeah, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
What was interesting, though, is that, I don't know if you read it anywhere, but I read a report about how an asteroid came within 1.5 million, miles or something, million miles of hitting the Earth yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. And apparently another one's coming within 1 million miles of the Earth. So get your doomsday plans ready.
Well, hey, if they don't hit anywhere near me, I'll be pretty happy about that. I'll go hide in the
You
sewers.
realize what happens when a meteorite hits a full meteorite hits the Earth, Brendan. But it kind of spells doom no matter where you are.
Come on, Armageddon. What is that crap? That's a myth. Come on.
You mean we don't have someone ready to go in a space shuttle to shoot into the asteroid, or we don't have a laser to blow up an asteroid or something?
No, we got to call up Bruce Willis real quick. You got to send a bunch of untrained oil rig workers up into the asteroid just to blow it up.
Yeah, to drill a hole into the middle of it or something. Are we gonna have what's her name, like from Gravity or whatever, go into space, and then eventually, I don't know. I don't even know what happened in that movie. I didn't see the movie. I didn't want to know what happened in the movie, but that just looked weird. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't see it. And tell you the truth, I'd rather Sandra Bullock not go into space. Yeah, I'd rather her come hang out with me.
Oh, anyway, so if we haven't bored you already with our snow rant and everything else, we'll get to lacrosse here. Brendan, a lot of exciting news came out. The first of which I'd like to tackle is probably the smallest amount of news, but then again, any news for lacrosse is good news, and the fact that they got their own stringing and dyeing and whatever else you want to call it, a company partnership, Mesh String and Dye, as they announced partnerships with the Gimilac, String King Lacrosse, East Coast Dyes, and Stylen Strings to give MLL players access to quote-unquote highlight grade and most creative mesh and string kits on the market. Brendan, what do you think of the move and the mood? Okay, not the mood. The signing as it pertains to the MLL players and, what it means for the game.
I'm a plain and simple kind of guy. Like, yeah, it's cool to have a colored head or a colored shaft or something like that. And maybe if I was younger, I'd be more interested in the, cool designs, the Argyle like Jesse Schwartzman has, or the American flag like Scotty Rogers has. It'd be interesting to have that if I was a younger kid, but I'm old school, man. Solid color, that's it. Team colors, that's cool. It's cool. It's cool that companies like that are making a name for themselves and stuff like that. And I honestly, I like the idea behind it. Them signing those companies and in a sense, gonna make the market bigger for the game of lacrosse. So it's not a bad move. I prefer old school, solid colors and whatnot. But it's not a bad move for the league to go to.
Yeah, I don't know how big of a deal it is. I really don't understand exactly. I guess why it's a big deal at all. I just feel like if obviously this wasn't the big news that came out, but I'm kind of on your boat. I didn't really care about having a blue and white head with like cool designs on it, or 15 shooting strings of different colors and like monster mesh with green mesh. I remember when I was in like 6th grade, all that stuff kind of mattered. I don't know about you, but whenever you went to camps, you kind of like all these kids really talked about was like, oh, I got the new Crypto Pro Light, like with all this stringing and stuff. Like, it's so awesome. Like, look at my sticks. And then it would be like those kids who were like big stick head guys. Like, they knew every single thing, how much it costs, and everything like that. And I was kind of like, does that make you a good lacrosse player at all? Like, I don't know. As a player, like, is it that big of a deal? I guess having like a sponsors is cool and everything for your sticks, but unless they're gonna string your stick after every game, I don't know. I don't see the big deal about it.
Yeah, there's really not a great, big, huge deal to make about it. Yeah, it's great for that small company to get signed. East Coast Dyes, Gimilax, String King. I have a String King mesh kit on my one stick, and I absolutely love it. My stick strung with East Coast mesh, and I like that. It's not a bad ordeal too. With the wax and everything. I wanted to try something different, see what the whole hype thing was about, and it's not bad at all. It's just the whole dyed heads and all that stuff. Yeah, the designs are cool and whatnot, but at the same time, it's like, do you really need to? It's kind of like, do you really need that? I don't know. It's cool. The company's making a name for themselves. Like I said, they're making a move for their company to get bigger, and the MLL is making a move to market themselves and stuff like that. So it's not a bad move to marketing wise, and expanding the business wise. It's not a bad move. So yeah.
According to the press release here, Stylen Strings services, quote unquote, the University of Virginia, obviously one of the top teams in the nation. Steele Stanwyck, who used to play for Virginia, now plays for the Ohio Machine. And then, of course, Max Sebald, who plays for the New York Lizards, and apparently many more professional college, high school teams. So, maybe if there's a special game, they'll have something going in terms of what they want to show off in terms of having a cool new head. But at the end of the day, I don't think players really care that much. But I think the bigger news that came out, at least before these other two headlines that we'll talk about later, is that STX signed with the MLL, which was a big deal, and actually, which was kind of like, to me, I mean, I didn't even realize that STX wasn't even part of, like the MLL. I didn't know it was kind of just geared, I guess, to Warrior and its tune with that. And the STX, they're part of the MLL now, and that's really big in terms of a big sponsor. It's kind of uniting the game, which was the whole point of the commissioner of the MLL, kind of bringing both sports together and all the leagues, as many billions of leagues that they had, and also the big sponsors to make sure that the game grows and gets more popular. Now that you have Warrior, you also have STX, which opens the door for players to come on, which will lead into the next headline we'll get into. But immediately after that signing is that they signed Tucker Durkin, all-pro defenseman for what was the Hamilton Nationals and now for the Florida Nationals, and one of the best, easily the best defenders in the league now, after going all-pro last year in his rookie season. And just for, I guess, in terms of who they had before, they were all really LXM guys. Peter Baum, Sam Bradman, Tim Desko, Matt Russell, Max Ritz, and Kyle Harrison was their team. And then, official sponsor of Team USA, Hopkins, Cornell, Lehigh, Syracuse, Penn State, Ohio State, Navy, Villanova, and North Carolina. And then they also signed Ryan Young as well. So, Brendan, with all the signings, how do you think this is going to impact the growth of the game? Also, the players they choose to bring on, and anything like that?
Yeah, well, I was reading a couple tweets between Brian Spallina and a couple other guys. And Spallina's not too happy about it. He voices his opinion, and that's his opinion. And I mean, he'll listen to other people's opinions, but his opinion is his opinion, along with anybody else, in a sense. A lot of the LXM guys were guys that did apparently get cut, from what I was reading, from MLL teams. Whether it was they just weren't performing, or their job or something like that. I don't know. But I lost my train of thought real. With them signing STX, it's that's a good thing. STX has a lot of stick technology coming out. The Stallion, the Professor head, the Revolver head. Those are, and they have a lot of good gear coming out, and it was about time that they signed with them, because a lot of the kids I coach use those sticks. Use those heads. I've seen a few kids with the Rabel head. I've seen a few kids, with Evos, which have been around for, years on end. And, STX is really hitting the market hard with, the Kyle Harrison line and stuff like that. So it's a good, it's another marketing ordeal again for the MLL to sign with STX. As for the players, like you said, two number one picks in Tim Desko and Peter Baum both played for. Now, I think their jobs may have had something to do with it, something like that. But it's good now that they signed together, because the LXM is going into the winter area, where they're going to go and market themselves, market the game of lacrosse into the areas that the MLL isn't already in, which they technically have been doing. They've been marketing the game of lacrosse, not the MLL, but they have been marketing themselves and the game of lacrosse in cities like San Diego, San Francisco. Chicago was one of the areas the MLL was in, but then failed. Atlanta, where the MLL is going to play the championship weekend this year. They've been there. Dallas, which, would be a great city to get into, bring Jerry Jones into the whole mix, maybe, as I've been saying all along. It's a good thing that they finally combined. It was shortcoming in a sense. It was about time that they did it. I think you may have mentioned something a couple shows ago about LXM possibly signing on with MLL. I don't want to give you credit for that, because I think you did say something like that a couple shows ago. I'm not completely positive. And like I said, it was shortcoming. It was, Kyle Harrison said, the idea behind it was possibly, that was possibly the big idea behind it, is to eventually combine the two leagues. And, them combining was probably the best move for the lacrosse world professionally.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, as you mentioned, we'll go right into the headline. The whole thing was, in terms of pairing STX up with the MLL, was now that STX was the big company kind of providing funds and all this stuff for the LXM Pro Tour, which Kyle Harrison started. And I guess what you had thought before, what we had done before a couple of shows ago, I want to say one of our first shows, like third or fourth show, was how much the LXM Pro was either hurting or helping lacrosse. I mean, it wasn't hurting lacrosse, we said, but we were saying, like, in terms of the talent pool, there's all these really talented players in the LXM Pro Tour, and we thought, how much is that hurting the MLL brand? And for those two leagues to combine now, I think is really awesome for the sport, because now, for those of you who didn't follow the press release and what had happened last week, is now that these two leagues are going to combine, or not, I shouldn't say combine, but they're going to allow they're going to allow players from both leagues to play in each other's leagues. So when the MLL season is done in the summer, they're going to play in the winter and expand the sport to areas, all the places the LXM Pro Tour was going, San Francisco and Arizona and Utah and Washington and, Texas and all these areas that don't have MLL teams. And that's huge for the sport, and also it's good for MLL because there's so many talented players in the LXM Pro Tour. I mean, you got the Ritz brothers, Xander and Max. You have the Bratton brothers, Shamel and Ramel. You have Peter Baum. You have Harrison. You have, why am I drawing a blank? You have Benson Irwin. You have Matt Russell in goal. You have Johnny Rodriguez, who's like a two-time All-American D3 at Salisbury, along with Sam Bradman. So you really have a lot of talented players that can make MLL rosters and make the game a little better. Also provides cornerstones for if you want to start a new franchise, you have better players to come in this cornerstone type franchise, instead of having all these teams stacked up like you see all these teams with like New York Lizards and the Charlotte, or not New York Lizards, but somewhat of the New York Lizards, but more so Chesapeake Bayhawks in terms of all the great players they have. Some of those players will now be dispersed once they start up other teams. I think that's great for the sport. And it also kind of begs the question, Brendan, of where do you think the next, we looked at it a couple weeks ago in that same show, where do you think the next team will come up in the U.S.? Is it another Northeast team, or do you think it's going to happen with all these areas that the LXM Pro Tour is playing the games in?
The LXM Pro Tour is playing is obviously cities that the MLL probably has visited before. They had the San Francisco Dragons, they had the LA Riptide. Both were around for a year or two, and then just they expanded at the wrong time, and things just fell apart. So I think they're going to look out west again, just so Denver doesn't have to travel all the way east all the time, and maybe do like an east-west ordeal like they had. They'll probably look into San Francisco again, LA again, maybe even Las Vegas. Get a couple showgirls on the sideline. Dallas and Atlanta are two big cities down south, which definitely could produce possible lacrosse teams for the pro league. They're having the championship weekend in Atlanta this year, which they've had games there before, and the turnout was well. And then Dallas, they had a couple games there over the past few years, dating back to when the Philly Barrage went down there and played. They had they had an okay turnout. I wasn't sure about the attendance. I can't remember the attendance off the top of my head. But I wouldn't be, Dallas wouldn't be a bad area to go, because I'm trying to get Jerry Jones in on this. All right. Dan, Commissioner Gross, let's go get Jared Jones. All right. Pick him up. Let's go. But I honestly think a Northeast team would be the next one to pop up. And they're trying to bring Hamilton back next year, from what I understand. But maybe Philly will pop up again. I'd love to have a team back in Philly. I know it'd be closer for both of us. Instead of driving down all the way to Annapolis. No offense to Coach Cottle and the Bayhawks, but I'd rather drive an hour to Philly than 2.5 hours down to Baltimore. So I see a Northeast team popping up before another team anywhere else.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing in terms of where the next team would pop up. I agree with you. The closest teams to me would probably be a split between a Philly team. Obviously, if they put a New Jersey team in, but they won't because it's New Jersey. Granted, it's one of the hotbeds here in Jersey, but they probably wouldn't do it because there's no quote-unquote big city. The biggest city is New York, and they already have two teams in New York and Rochester. And then, of course, on the island in the New York Lizards, that would probably be the closest team for me right now. Even though sometimes, getting through the city is like hell. It's terrible. You could spend 3 hours on the Jersey Turnpike going nowhere sometimes. So, but anyway, I agree with you. I think, as much as the MLL would like to go national and go to an LA, which, I think would definitely, they tried it once, like you said, it didn't work out with the LA Riptide, but there is a base there. There are teams in California in terms of high school teams that are very good, very, very good nationally. St. Ignatius Prep, you got Torrey Pines down there. So, there are teams, there's talent there. I don't know if they go there yet. I would assume, kind of like other leagues, you kind of start in the Northeast, in the bigger markets, really get a stranglehold there, and then move west. Not a lot of the major TV, radio, partnerships are really all out west. It's really in the east. You got Philly, Washington, New York, even Miami, even Atlanta. LA is like the second biggest behind New York, but everything else is usually, out here in the east. So kind of locking down those markets would probably be the best. I would agree with you. Philly would probably be a good place. Not where they held the MLL Championship weekend this past weekend. That would not be a good idea at all. Not this past weekend, but this past year. I just don't think you could do it. It's not appealing to fans. It's a beautiful, beautiful stadium, and the sun, looking out on the water and the Ben Franklin Bridge is great and all, but you got to find a better place, more conforming to tourists. As bad as that as bad as that is, that's just the reality of it. Trying to get people to come. And then I do think an Atlanta team. Hopefully they move back to Hamilton and keep the Florida team, but you need another team to balance it out. I think Atlanta could be that team, especially if they're bringing the MLL Championship weekend there.
Yeah, I completely agree. Where they had the tournament this year, the championship weekend this year was, it wasn't the safest area, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And you walk a block, you walk maybe down the street from the place, and you might get I don't want to say anything.
Yeah, it's just not good.
Yeah, the area surrounding. Like you said, the stadium and the view is absolutely spectacular. The stadium is perfect for a pro lacrosse team. You know what I mean? Like, it's small, it's not oversized. It'll you could sell it out. The Philadelphia Union have a big following, but that's also, pro soccer, and soccer is, one of the biggest sports in the world. Guys like Kaká and Ronaldo and all those guys. And that's something that the lacrosse world maybe need to take after. Look at what soccer's done and how big it's expanded. The MLS. Look how big it's expanded over the past couple of years. You know what I mean? They finally got a team in Philly not too long, a few years ago. They've had the New York Red Bulls. I think they play in Jersey. I might be wrong.
Yeah, they play right in Harrison. They play in Harrison.
Yeah. So they've added teams over the past couple of years, and maybe the MLL needs to take a look at that. see what their marketing strategy was, see what their expansion strategy was, and look into that and see, what did they do, and how can we follow those steps in a sense, and you know, and grow the league, grow the sport, etc. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Philly, the area around the stadium, the excuse me, PPL Park wasn't the best. They had the Philly Barrage played at Villanova. They played at USTC up the road, 20 minutes away from me. And both areas they weren't bad areas. Villanova was right on the main line near LaSalle, Haverford, schools like that. And then USTC's up here by me, or downtown east, downtown west, Shanahan, Malvern, Great Valley, schools like that are up and coming. So I mean, if they do bring a team back to Philly, wherever they choose to have the stadium is going to have to be in an area that's booming. Not has already boomed, but is booming because no one really. I hate driving down 476. I can tell you that right now. It's really one of the dumbest roads I've ever driven down. It's a pain in the butt to get to. First of all, going down 76, and then you're driving around the air. Don't get me wrong, the main line's a beautiful area. It's just a pain in the butt to get to. It's a two-way street. It's 2 lanes, and it's 25 miles an hour. People walking everywhere. It's a busy area, which isn't bad. To put a team in, but at the same time, it's just a pain in the butt to get to. But if they put a team down in Atlanta, which I hope they do, like you said, they need to balance it out. But if they do put a team in Atlanta and not put one in Hamilton, that'll balance it out. But if they do bring back the Hamilton team and have a team in Atlanta, they're going to have that extra team expanding. So where they go, I'm hoping Philly. I'd love to have a team back in Philly, be, really easy. But where they're going to have that third team put somewhere, because otherwise they're going to still be in odd numbers and it's just going to be awkward. I mean, I would love to have even teams, do a north-south maybe, or do like an east-west ordeal, and have like an east-west championship, have an east championship, a west championship, and then those 2 winners, go in, or the top 4 teams from there or whatever, go into championship weekend and play each other. I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, a couple of things you mentioned that I want to expand upon before we hit a break, but in terms of that last comment, I definitely agree with you that it needs to be even. And even if it's not even in terms of what teams they're going to do, I think what we're seeing in pro sports now is that everyone's kind of arguing about, the West is so bad and the East is so good, like in the NBA, and like, all these, the Western teams should just, they should unconference everything and just make it the best 16 teams make it. I think the MLL has a good plan. I mean, granted, 100% of it is because they just don't have the amount of teams to even make conferences, but even if they did, I think in its infancy right now, just make it a free-for-all right now and take the top 4 or 5 seeds, or how many teams there are, take whatever you think is right. Take the top 4 seeds, unconference it, make it, a tournament like it is, and the 4 or 5 best teams play. In terms of where they would go in Philly, I 100% agree with you that it has to be in a college. And I don't think it's even a drawback in terms of putting it in a college. Like, when we went to PPL Park, the place I think it's supposed to hold like 9,000, something like that, or 16. I don't even know what the number was. Like 16,000, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And they got like 4,000 the whole entire weekend at that place, and it looked empty. It looked really empty. And even if they do that thing like in lacrosse where they just show one sideline and it looks pretty packed, it looked pretty empty either way. Putting it in a smaller stadium means it actually looks packed. It actually looks like it's popular. You can sell it off to TV dealers. Like, look what happens when you broadcast our game. There's so many people there. There's so, and we're in Villanova. It's a nice area. It's right on the campus. Kids who play lacrosse currently at Villanova can go. Even just random fans, random students can go and see it. Also, everywhere, I mean, I don't know how far Villanova is from the main line, like you said. I think you said it's right on the main line. It's perfect transportation. I mean, I don't want to say people need to get drunk and go, but if people do get drunk, you don't have to worry about them driving. They get drunk somewhere, take public transportation, and get home safely. I mean, I'm not trying to promote drinking. We don't do that here unless you're over 21, you know, you're legal age. But if you're going to choose that route, you drink before, you go on the subway where you're not handling anything, you walk into the game, have a good time, come back. You're not going to go in a car and get hurt and hurt other people that, you know, kids and families that are there. Get behind the wheel when you're drunk. If you are drunk for some reason, go on the transit, take it right back to home. I mean, it just makes sense. You know, and I think it's just something smart to do. I mean, Atlanta would be a good idea just because of the South, like we said. And then Denver's just going to have to bite the bullet between going back and forth. I mean, obviously, like we said, we'd love for it to go in LA or San Francisco or even Texas if you have to go out west. Go Texas. A lot of great Texas high schools are coming up. So we're going to hit a break right now. When we come back, me and Brendan are going to look at the LXM Pro Tour players and look at who exactly would get drafted by MLL teams, who could still play, and then we're also going to talk about the newest TV contract that the MLL has. So a lot of exciting stuff here. Here's some music as we take a break.
Fresh Kid C, Fresh Kid C, yes sir, Fresh Kid P, Fresh Kid T. Oh yeah, we back. Oh, and Zach Fool, by the way. Yeah, Jones. Yeah. Chitty bang, and we pretty much amazing. Can you hear the song, please? I got you. Hey yo, I once was a kid, all I had was a dream. More money, more problems. When I get it, I'ma pile it up. Now I'm dope, want the bread, we can toast so fresh. How we flow, everybody get this down from us. Was a kid with the other little kids, now I'm ripping up shows and the fans doing well with us. Tell mommy I'm sorry, this life is a party. Remember you was a kid, reminisce days of the innocence. Now it's Chitty Bang, Google me the images. Follow me, I'm the leader. And when I park cars, I don't pay for the meter. I remember I was younger as a kid, it was the best. I used to touch on all the pretty girls in recess. I'm at my peak, yes, I won't leave yet. Cereal style, cereal aisle, I need checks. I can make these rappers run like a hard drill. Rock band, show you how the guitar feel. And I could care less how y'all feel. I got a flow to make a bitch do a cartwheel. This is that good, just puff it and relax, bro. And you could get it free, don't worry about the tax, though. And Sam Fool, thank you for the crack. But I play around Burgundy, I anchor on the track. Hey, like that was a kid, all I had was a dream. More money, more problems. When I get it, I'ma pile it up. Now I'm dope, want the bread, we can toast so fresh. How we flow, everybody get this down from us. Was a kid with the other little kids, now I'm ripping up shows and the fans doing well with us. Tell mommy I'm sorry, this life is a party. I'm never growing up. Can I please get a little bit of knowledge? Somebody tell Rolf that I don't love college. Cause the real world's kinda like real world. And it's drama, so you are Svetlana and I'm just a rhymer. Swimming in the water trying to dodge the piranha and fly to Bahamas. Pretty little mama, Chitty in the spot where you at, Pearl it is. Show me what you got. They say why you rapping for the kids for? I say my clothes come fitted, the lit store. This summer you can catch me on a big tour. I'm high grade, I think they need the quiz more. And let me get with you, don't let the kid hit you. I'm the photo album for letter has, big picture. The rule is, the dude is, so up, so chuck, I'm a cool kid. I once was a kid, all I had was a dream. More money, more problems. When I get it, I'ma pile it up. Now I'm dope, want the bread, we can toast so fresh. How we flow, everybody get this down from us. Once was a kid with the other little kids, now I'm ripping up shows and the fans going well with us. Tell mommy I'm sorry, this life is a party. I'm never growing up. Was a kid, all I had was a dream. More money, more problems. When I get it, I'ma pile it up. Now I'm dope, want the bread, we can toast so fresh. How we flow, everybody get this down from us. Was a kid with the other little kids, now I'm ripping up shows and the fans going well with us. Tell mommy I'm sorry, this life is a party. I'm never growing up.
Welcome back, everybody, to MLL Roundtable here on a cold Tuesday
night. We hope you guys didn't get snowed in a little more by the current storm and are able to get out of your house a little bit. But if you are listening, thank you very much for doing so.
As always, you can tweet at us at MLL Roundtable, at Goldieberg, at BStout631 here for InLacrosseWeTrust.com, on the Lacrosse Radio Network, on Live 365. So for those of you who didn't tune in for the first half of our show, you missed us talking about the new partnerships that the MLL has with the custom stringing and mesh kits and, dye jobs and dye companies, in terms of East Coast Dyes and all these other things, and then STX Sun and the players that come with that. And we were talking about in terms of the LXM Pro Tour. So what we want to talk about right now is there's a really solid amount of LXM Pro Tour talent on the two teams that they play. And the biggest thing is that they now get to play for Major League Lacrosse as part of the STX signing, because a lot of those guys were on the STX team. Part of the STX partnership, and part of the reason why they couldn't play both sports is a conflict of interest, obviously, between STX and Warrior. Now that they're merged, it's no longer a problem. So, me and Brendan will look at both leagues and figure out here, Brendan, who do you feel has the best chance of getting drafted in this kind of new supplemental draft, in terms of the LXM Pro players
All right, brother, no
that
problem. Thanks.
are on the teams? I mean, there's a lot of talent, like we mentioned before today, and
Yeah,
when we
pleasure.
covered
All right.
the LXM and MLL stuff a couple weeks ago.
That's cool, dude. I'm
So
doing it
who
right
do
now.
you
So
kind of highlight as some of the best players that could
Brother.
get picked? You there, Brendan?
hey, sorry. I had to tell Chamberlain's not feeling well, so he unfortunately can't come on. Sorry about that. What was your question?
Making me look bad, man. I'm trying to set you up on a tee, and you're just not even listening.
I'm not. I wasn't trying to interrupt you. I was about to type to you. Don't ask me a question, but stuff happens.
Yeah, no, I got you. So what I'm saying is that we looked at all these, the LXM Pro Tour, you got a lot of players there, and they're going to be able to play in the MLL now. Who are some of the LXM Pro Tour players that you think could play on MLL teams?
Well, it's hard to say because a couple of these guys have played in the pros. Like Kyle Harrison. He played. Matt Russell played a couple games for Chesapeake. And then Peter Baum and Tim Desko were both drafted number ones in their year of being drafted by the MLL. Billy Bitter played, and then decided to go to LXM. I think that was. But I mean, like a couple of these guys can, like the guys I mentioned, Billy Bitter, Kyle Harrison, Peter Baum, Matt Russell, Tim Desko. Those guys can definitely play. Harrison might have a couple of years, maybe a year or two left in him. Just, he's up there in age, and the guy can still. I will never tell you right now that guy can't bring it, or ever couldn't bring it. Davey Amala has a chance to do it. He played at UNC. He's a guy that's a possible, he's a midfielder. He's a big guy. So he has a chance, be like one of those crease midfielders, if you will. Then you get like the Rich brothers who were, decent players. And, they were good players at Maryland, both attackmen. They played, and you don't go to a D1 college like Maryland, UNC, UMBC, Colgate, Hopkins. You don't, Syracuse, Denver. You don't go to schools like that for no reason. And you don't get drafted number one for no reason either. In schools like Virginia, like the Bratton brothers, those guys, they could break ankles like none other. I remember just watching these guys during the Syracuse game, and I think it was, I forget which one it was. They both played, decently the same. But one of them just broke the ankles of the Syracuse defender and scored the goal, ran off, and was just cramping so hard because he was running like crazy. And that's the heart that those kids did have in the game before. Unfortunately, they did get dismissed from the Virginia team. And then you got a player like Johnny Christmas, who played in the MLL for a couple of years. Played for the Philadelphia Wings for a year or two. So he's had experience at the MLL level. So I mean, he'd be a pretty decent possibility to play too. I mean, a lot of these guys, have played D1. Notre Dame, Rutgers, Georgetown. A couple of Virginia guys. Penn State. There's a couple guys on here that can play. That obviously can play lacrosse. So I mean, it's not that they couldn't play. It's just that they may not, one, fit the system that the coaches want to run. Two, they may be up there in age. And three, there might just be younger talent. Like guys like Rob Pennell, Steve Mock, Mason Poley, Owen Bly. Guys like that. Marcus Holman, Garrett Thole, young talent like that just click better than these guys do. So I mean, everybody has a good possibility of playing, but at the same time, they do have to get over the hump of the younger, I want to say now better talent that's coming through the college system.
Yeah, I mean, my concern over the whole thing is that, they reopened the player pool, so you could submit your name. It could be anyone. It could literally be me, my mom, you, my dad, my grandma, your grandma. Like, anybody can submit their name to be in this pool. But the thing that concerns me, I guess, is that they've had 2 drafts already. These teams are already at they have a 40-man roster limit. They were at 23 before the 2 drafts. And after 2 drafts, they've added around 16 players each, give or take a certain amount of draft picks through trades and everything. But I just don't know how many of these rosters really are allowed to grow. Like, how many roster spots are on the Long Island Lizards, the New York Lizards, or on the Florida Launch, or on the Chesapeake Bayhawks. I don't know if a lot of these guys are really going to get picked. And my thing is that while I do think that I do think Shamel Bratton could play. I do think Ramel Bratton could play. I think Johnny Rodriguez could play. Zach Brenneman, he was a big-time midfielder out of Notre Dame for them a couple years back. Sean Lindsay from Syracuse. Who else we got? Eric Crum was a big deal from Salisbury. Sam Bradman, Peter Baum, Matt Russell, Max and
Sean
Ritz,
Delaney,
like you said, Davey Mala from UNC, and then Benson Irwin and Tim Desco as well is, will they be able to get drafted? And I think all of them can play, and all of them can make really big impacts for teams. And also what happens to those guys in the supplemental draft that got picked. I mean, they were already long shots to make the team, and I think there's a lot of those guys that won't make the team if they add another couple of guys. I mean, do you think that they maybe trade some of those guys away? Or, not trade, cut some of those guys that, they were just like, whatever, I'll just take this guy and take a flyer on him? What do you think about that? Because I think, okay, let's take Ohio Machine, because basically how the draft is going to work is it comes through a waiver wire process in terms of last year's record. So it'll be Ohio first, and then I think it's Rochester,
No,
and
New York.
New York.
I thought New York before.
Ohio already has Peter Baum, and because they drafted him a couple of years ago, imagine a midfield unit with him, Tommy Schreiber, and, say, Sam Bradman. All of a sudden, they aren't so bad.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Yeah.
It's. I think, did they get Tim Desco too? Or did New York get Tim
Not
Desco?
entirely sure about that. I could look it up real quick, though.
Yeah, I think Tim Desco either went to New York or went to Ohio. I forget which one. But they honestly, names change, I guess you could say. The guys playing in the LXM Pro Tour play what, once, maybe if they're lucky, twice a month.
Right.
Maybe if even a month in. Looking at the schedule now, they played, once they played twice in, just from 2013. They didn't play till June. They played twice in June, once in July, once in September, twice in October, once in November, twice in December, and twice in January. It's February, and they haven't played one game. It's almost the end of February. They haven't played one game. So this is what I'm saying. Like, these guys are playing every once in a while. Don't get me wrong. I would love to play every once in a while if I could. I wish I wasn't living in the real world. I wish I was living in the lacrosse world, if you will. I wish I had the skills these guys did. I mean, being a goalie, just pointing out Matt Russell from Navy, that kid was just something special. Just watching him play was just it was an honor to watch him play, in a sense, if you will. I mean, playing for Navy and Coach Meade, it being part of the military system, the United States military system, like that is just a big honor. Especially going to play lacrosse for them. And Navy, and I absolutely respect the Navy, Army, VMI, Air Force, those guys. I absolutely respect those guys for, and I thank for, I'm sure you do too, for, doing what they do and sacrificing their time and their lives to, keep our freedom and allowing us to do this radio show. But, it's tough to say, the MLL needs to expand. Period. End sentence. I mean, like you said, do they trade some of those guys that they, picked up in the supplemental draft? More than likely, I feel like the first 2 rounds of the supplemental draft, those guys had the biggest shot at making the rosters, and the other guys are already, waived. I mean, no offense to their skills or anything. I'm just saying, like, in most cases, that's usually what happens. And then they're going to go into the player pool and pick from 2 teams, Maverick and STX, and it's, you have decent talent on these rosters, and it could take, Sam Bradman could definitely play. I mean, that kid is just, he even he got asked to try out for Team USA. Like, how you, like, obviously that's one of the biggest things that's going to go into a coach's mind is like, holy crap, this kid USA, try out for Team USA. Unfortunately, didn't make it, but that could be work or something like that, or just dropped out. And that's the other thing going into this year is Team USA. There's going to be 23 to 30 guys that aren't going to be available just because they're training for Team USA. Yeah, sure, they may show up for a game or two, which I hope they do, just to keep their keep loose and everything like that. That's a whole other thing. Is just these players, could they be picked up? Put on waivers and whatnot. That whole process, and then as soon as Team USA, the FIL games in Denver, as soon as they hit, who's going to get who's going to come up to the team? That's going to be a whole other ordeal. So we'll have a good time around that week or two.
Yeah, and I mean, like you had said, I mean, these guys aren't playing that much. They're playing once or twice, a month if they're lucky. And that was actually our biggest question about Kyle Harrison when he was picked by Team USA, is how in the world is he going to be picked? I mean, how could he be picked when he, barely plays? I mean, granted, he could still play, and he's better than a lot of the guys currently in the MLL, but out of the list that they were choosing from, I mean, what's his stamina and conditioning going to be like? I mean, he's a big-time athlete, but, still, it's kind of got to be thrown out there. I agree with you. I do think a lot of these guys would get cut. In terms of the guys who have the best chance of being picked, it would be all those guys that were mentioned. Amala, the Ritz brothers, Bratton brothers, Russell maybe. I don't know where he would go because I feel like there's so many good goalies out there, especially that were just picked in the draft. Desco, Harrison, and by the way, I just saw, or as I was looking up while we were talking, is that Desco was picked in the last year's supplemental draft by the Charlotte Hounds, so I think they have him. But I don't know. But I don't think they chose to keep him, so he might just be on the waiver wire right now. So that should be interesting. And also, I guess you don't know what these guys' other commitments are, in terms of what will happen with guys and whether they're going to choose to play. Because some of these guys could be eligible, but won't put their names in the player pool and thus won't be picked. So I think that's something to look out for. So as we have 10 minutes left here on the show. This is Andrew Goldberg, Brendan Stout here on MLL Roundtable for InLacrosseWeTrust.com on Lacrosse Radio Network. MLL announced, the final thing that they announced is that they announced more games to be televised, which is awesome. On the CBS Sports Network, obviously one of the big companies, big 4 or 5 companies, television stations that are trying to create their own sports network. They're kind of very far behind the 8 ball, behind ESPN, but they're trying to catch up between them and Fox Sports and NBC. So what's great is now that they went from I think they only televised about 11 or 12 games last year, and now they're increasing that, doubling that, and going all the way up to 24, which is like a pretty solid amount of the season. They'll also, or actually it was 20 from last season, so they won't be doubling it, but they'll be adding it by 4. Still great, though. And they're adding the MLL All-Star Game at Harvard, the MLL semifinal and championship games as well in Atlanta, and I would assume no, that's it. So they got all that, and I think that's really great for the sport in terms of me and you trying to evaluate everything. We don't want to be going on YouTube the next day evaluating, looking at games and seeing how guys play. We want to see it live. This past weekend, 2 amazing lacrosse games, the Moe's Lacrosse Classic down in Jacksonville, Florida. The first game actually kind of stunk. It was Notre Dame 16, Jacksonville 5. The second game was awesome between UMass and Ohio State, and I was able to watch that on TV. It was awesome. So I think this is awesome for the sport in terms of trying to grow the game. Like we said, you put it on CBS Sports Network, which needs programming, and I think it's great for the sport. I mean, what do you think about it, Brendan?
I think it's absolutely fantastic that they're putting more games on. I mean, like you said, we've seen amazing games this year so far. Loyola, Virginia, OT. Unfortunately, Syracuse and Albany was not televised in the area or on ESPN3, which is
a crime.
Yeah, it's a crime. It's legitimately a crime. How do you not put on one of the biggest rivalries in college lacrosse? How?
Yeah, instead they opted for women's basketball across all of the ESPN networks, which I tweeted out, and I said, I'm glad ESPN thought that women's basketball was more important to broadcast today than about 4 or 5 overtime classics. Now, I know you can't forecast that, but, I mean, even put it on ESPNU or ESPN3. I mean, you have 3 Thompson brothers and one of the biggest lacrosse programs in the history of the sport playing against each other. I mean, it was bound to be an amazing game, and it was, and none of us were able to see it.
Yeah, that was, like you said, it was a crime. Nothing against women's basketball, but when you're trying to expand a sport in a sense, when they bump it to the side like that, it's just, it's poop. Let's put it that way, it's poop. But then, like you said, the Moe's Southwest Classic was on this weekend. Jacksonville, Notre Dame. Notre Dame, obviously, a blowout. That midfielder, the freshman midfielder, number 16, holy crap, I can tell you that right now. That kid is going to be a player.
William Connors, the face-off guy?
No, the midfielder.
Marlick, Kavanaugh?
No, he's a freshman. Hold on.
All right, whatever.
I'll look him up in a minute. But the kid is just, he's phenomenal. What's his name? Sergio Perkovic. A Michigan kid. Yeah, Sergio Perkovic. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. It might be Perkovic. I'm not sure. I apologize for the pronunciation there, Sergio. He's a freshman, and the kid's just he's got a rocket, and it's just unfair. I personally know the goaltender for Jacksonville, Peter DeLuca. And I just watching him just get lit up that game was rough. I mean, I felt bad for that kid.
So very rough.
Or before being goalies or whatnot. I mean, I personally never really got lit up in a sense. But getting hung out to dry by your defense, I'll say. That's the worst feeling that people onlooking can have for their goalie. I mean, sometimes the people are like, "Oh no, why didn't the goalie stop that one?" Blah blah blah. But at the same time, it's like, you're not going to do anything when a kid at the Division I level has a 10-yard shot wide friggin' open. Like, you're not it's hard for a goalie to do anything like that unless he just runs at him and just takes a shot straight to the face. But then I unfortunately didn't get to see the Ohio State game. I'm pretty upset about that. I was watching True Detective at the time.
Boo.
That's a classic. OT. I got to watch the Johns Hopkins Ohio State game the other day. That went into triple overtime. I mean,
That was
come
awesome.
on. I mean, you're having games this year going to overtime after overtime after overtime. How is this sport not catching the eye of people? Like, so, like it's beyond it's over my head. Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point, and I mean, that gets back to everything. CBS Sports, it's a bigger broadcasting thing. You can watch it. I mean, for DirecTV or not DirecTV, for Cablevision and Optimum online people, you can watch it on channel 143. I definitely will this summer, but it's huge. I mean, it gets more exposure for the sport, and like we said, it helps grow the sport. And maybe these. I mean, granted, in the summertime, it's very hard to get people to sit down and watch when it's so nice out. You can go to the beach. I mean, kids are out at camp or outside a lot and doing fun things. I mean, it's hard to get to watch, but there's really not much to watch. What are you going to do? You're going to sit down and watch 3 hours of baseball? I mean, I can barely do that going to a game and going to a game, and I'm a Yankee fan. You go and watch a game, and you're sitting there for 3 hours, and in between innings, you're on your phone because you get service, or it's just crazy. And lacrosse, you really can't be on your phone because you will miss something. I mean, granted, there are times where it kind of slows down a bit, but there is a shot clock in the MLL, unlike the college game. And you have some of the best talent right now. I mean, it's kind of like the early infancy of like the NBA and the NFL. You have really talented players all over, just star-studded teams, and you see the best of the best. You truly see the best. There's no dilution of talent amongst teams, but I think it's really going to help grow the sport here. As we move forward, maybe hopefully they'll get a full season where they just put all of the games on the CBS Sports Network, or maybe Fox Sports gets it. I doubt it, because they're really on the Big East, and obviously their big thing is the NFL, and every news station is. And by that time, it's kind of training camp and everything, so that takes the cake. But I mean, when you look at the sport of lacrosse and how marketable it is, it's very high scoring. I mean, none of these games are ever 9-8. They're all like, I think the lowest scoring game is like the championship game, which is to be expected, or it's a 13-12 game where guys are taking about 60 shots a game, and it's up and down, and you got really big names. I agree with you. I don't know how it's not more marketable. It's got the hitting of lacrosse. It's got strategy of basketball. You got the whole hockey stick thing with the helmets, and obviously the way you have to dangle and stuff. I just don't see why it won't grow more, and hopefully this will help with the CBS Sports.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, we got Evan Washburn and Quentin Kasnick. Quentin does it for ESPN. Washburn does it for CBS, and they do a decent job. I mean, obviously, there's Quintisms, if you will, that everybody talks about all the time, and Evan does a really good job. I mean, both of them do a really good job. Evan does a good job. He's very content with everything. He just does his job, and that's what he does. Quentin gets into it in a different level, we'll say.
Just because he was an All-American at Hopkins and he really knows the game.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And then I mean, Washburn played at Delaware, which is no bread and butter, if you will. So both of them, they do their job. They do a good job, and I hope they keep it up. Just getting exposure for the game itself is absolutely fantastic. And I really hope that this new TV contract, getting games out and whatnot, really pushes the envelope, if you will.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you everyone for tuning in to MLL Roundtable with myself, Andrew Goldberg, and my co-host Brendan Stout on this cold Tuesday night. Tweet at us at MLL Roundtable, at Goldieberg, at BStout631, and like us on Facebook. MLL Roundtable. You can tweet at us, Facebook, whatever, and let us know what you guys think of how all these partnerships are going to help out the MLL. And we'll see you guys next Tuesday. And have a good night, everybody.